完了5分前に始めるんだね。結構ギリギリまでだったんだね。ちょっと待ってね。皆さんの声を入れますね。はい。まず今日打ち上げ3つあります。今日の打ち上げ3つありますが、その1つ目ベガロケットの打ち上げが今から5分後ぐらいにありますよ。もう早い。フランス語版にしよう。フランス語版にしてくる。おはりや来てくれてありがとう。見て今日の衣装もちゃんとベガっぽいでしょ。
Pléiades Neo will be separated 54 minutes after liftoff, and 47 minutes after the separation of Pléiades Neo, we will have the separation of the 5 auxiliary payload, all that at an altitude of 600 kilometers. And we have now the DDO, or launch manager, who is saying that everything is okay to go for the launch. So we are really now in the final countdown.
プレアイデスネオっていうのかな。プレアイデスネオっていう衛星。
Stefan, I know you've got a very busy few minutes ahead of you. So
これも地球観測衛星らしくて4つ衛星があるんですけど、これのうちの1つ目、一番最初の衛星です。
Thank you.
So now I turn to my whiz kid.
たまに表示できて偉い。NEXT これちゃんとありますからね。次の次はちょっとね、どうしようかなと思ってたんですよ。次の次はね、
After the liftoff is triggered by the ignition of the
プレアデス星団って
P80
素晴らしいことだね。そうだね。プレアデスの何人星だっけ？日本語では羽子板星って言うんだけど、そのプレアデスのこと？ベガはここのとこ打ち上げ失敗が続いてたので、名誉回復なるか。軌道投与にこの間失敗していましたね、確かね。打ち上げ自体は最初うまくいったように見えたんですけど、最後の方で分離までいかなかった。分離というか、投入したところがちょっと違ったって感じだったっけ？前のやつ。楽しみ、今日いっぱい打ち上げ見るぞ。面白かったらもういっぱいたくさんしてください。いっぱい拡散してください。これがまずイグニッションカットオフって書いてますね。打ち上げ25分後、30分後、50分後。打ち上げ50分後にオーストラリアの上ぐらいでプレアデスネオを分離して3段目をカットオフして
injection into the orbit required by the auxiliary passengers with 2 boosts, the third and the fourth AVUM boost, which will occur in visibility of Galileo, and we have the sequence of separation of the 5 auxiliary passengers in visibility of Bermuda, one after another. The launcher will complete its mission with the 5th AVUM boost in visibility of Saint-Hubert in order to trigger the re-entry.
Very quick question before we get to the final countdown. Compared to, say, when Thomas Pesquet went up to the ISS last week, how is it the same orbit or?
No, it's not the same orbit. We will start, of course, with the altitude of the ISS. At the end of the first AVUM boost, we are slightly below the altitude of the ISS. During the first ballistic phase that we discussed about, the altitude increases and we go beyond the altitude of the ISS. And we separate all our customers far beyond the altitude of the ISS.
会話とかしてみようかなと思います。みんなも中国語ちょっと話してみようよ。来るかな？来てくれたら嬉しいんだけどな。あと1分で打ち上げがあります。何も解説しないまま終わってしまうぞ、こんなの。ベガロケットはまずそもそもアリアンスペースという会社が運用しています。イーサっていう欧州宇宙機関っていうのがあるんですけど、そこのロケットです。つまりヨーロッパですね。ヨーロッパ関係のロケットだと思ってもらえれば OK です。
So we're almost there. And just also the ground stations, very quickly in 10 seconds, their role.
Yes, we have several ground stations around the Earth
この子はね、みんな最近液体ロケットばっかり見てきたと思うんですけど、1段目、2段目、3段目、もう全部固体。固体ロケットモーターも多分終 オンリーのやつあんま見なくない？
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
2、打ち上げ。
allumage P80 et décollage V18.
打ち上がった。フランス語のカウントしたかった。リフトー。何語？フランス語かな？かわークリアーいってらっしゃーい打ち上げがもう配信が5分前から始まったからもうこんな感じで打ち上げなんですね。めっちゃ早いじゃん。さすが個体の速さ。
Propulsion est nominale.
聞こえる？ちょっと音量上げてみ。音量上げるよ。
Tired of seeing those
No,
launches
No,
doing.
it's always something
もう
very
見えなくな
beautiful
っちゃっ
to
たの
look
か
at.
な。
So we're into it now. What happens? We track it now. Tell me what happens now.
Yeah, now we are in the phase that we call the P80 phase. It's the name of the first stage boosters, which allows us to get far from the launch pad. During this phase, we burn solid propellant, so the name of P80 comes from the amount of propellant that we have on board, so it's roughly 80 tons of propellant, slightly more. And during these phases, the launcher provides thrust and accelerations, and the separation of the stage will be triggered when the acceleration will get below a predefined threshold in order to get use of this mass, which is useless once you have used almost all the propellant inside.
When will the first separation take place?
The first separation will take place around 2 minutes after liftoff, so we should see it in a few seconds.
And you're monitoring. You're directly in contact with Kuru.
Yeah, I have a direct contact with the people who are getting the real-time telemetry data and who are monitoring the current status of the launch. So as soon as I will get the confirmation, I will let you know along all the mission.
And this is the next really important stage.
Yes, and the separation of the P80 has just been confirmed, and we have the ignition of the second stage, which we call the Zephyr 23.
So confirmation, the first separation has gone ahead as planned, which is what we were looking for.
Yeah.
What happens next?
Now it's the job of the second stage, which will increase still the launcher velocity and the altitude in order to provide additional energy to the launcher. And then when it will complete its job, it is exactly the same principle as for the P80. It means once we have used almost all the propellant that is inside the stage, we will trigger the separation once again based on the detection of the acceleration.
Okay, and in any moment now, we're going to hopefully go back to Kourou through the space wall and see the team monitoring all the progress. I guess the ground station's giving all the information as well.
Exactly.
Great. You know, it just, this whole operation is supposed to take, what, an hour and 40 between launch and dropping off all the different satellites?
Between the liftoff and the separation of the Pléiades Neo 3, we have around 55 minutes, and up to the separation of the auxiliary passenger, 1 hour and 40 seconds, more or less.
And you never get tired of a launch, do you?
No, it's always something very beautiful to look at.
So just a reminder, the launch took off about 3 or 4 minutes ago, and we're now waiting for the next separation detail to come up, and you'll know about it very soon because Damien is in constant contact with the range manager, with Kourou, and I guess that's going to be imminent now.
We are getting close to the moment of separation, but we are still waiting for the final moment.
And just a reminder, you're watching us here from Toulouse, where Airbus has its headquarters, where the satellite was made. And I have Damien here from Aerospace giving me all the latest information. And I'm going to be joined here very soon by Raphael, also from Aerospace. Yeah.
I want to share with you the fact that the separation of the Zephyr 23 has been confirmed, and we have the start of the roll maneuver before meeting the Z9.
This is very good news, right?
And the fairing has been separated as well.
So that's great. So come on in now. So what we want to do now is we want to go through what the VEGA launcher is like.
Exactly, and Raphael will present you.
Raphael, let's go now to the magic of the studio and look at this VEGA launcher launch rocket and take us through everything.
Come out of the ground magically. So it's actually, the VEGA launcher is actually much bigger than this, of course. It's 30 meters tall. It weighs a little less than 140 tons. And it is composed of 4 stages, each playing a key role in the smooth execution of the launch mission. So the main stage that we see here is really the one who is going to put the VEGA launcher out of the Earth to extract it from the gravitational effect of the Earth. You see also that there is like a conical interstage that is making the junction between the first stage and the second stage, which diameter is slightly reduced to 2 meters, and the first stage was 3 meters diameter. And then the third stage that just ignited, and it will do this for a couple of minutes, is there. It's 4 meters tall. And then, of course, right now, we saw that the fairing was separated in 2 halves. It means that we are beyond the limits of the atmosphere. We don't need the fairing anymore to protect the satellites from the frictions of the air. Of the atmosphere, and also doing so we get rid of a dead weight that is not anymore useful for the rest of the missions. And of course this phase is very, very critical because otherwise we would not be able to separate the satellites into space. And last but not least, you have the last stage, the AVUM stage, which will continue the mission. It's absolutely key because this is the one who is going to put the satellites at the right locations in space. It has a reignition capability, which is absolutely key, and I think we will talk about it later.
I'm sure you will. These are amazing pictures we're looking at. And while I have you here on my right is my other guru. We're now waiting for the next separation element, right?
The separation of the separation has just occurred.
It just occurred.
Yeah,
okay, that's very good
separation
as
is
well. Okay, so let's moving forward now from there. Go ahead, Raphael. What else can you tell us now?
Maybe on the AVUM.
Yeah.
So I said that it's absolutely key technology because, especially for capturing the small satellites markets, because these are very specific satellites that typically have very limited propulsion capabilities. So it means that they require the launch vehicle to separate them as close as possible to their operational orbits. And we do this with several boosts in order to address complex missions. And doing this, it allows us also to optimize the filling ratio of the launch vehicle in order to share the cost of the launch between all the passengers. This is like a carpooling in space.
And that's the reason why we have Pléiades Neo and we have 5 other smaller satellites who are all taking part in this flight together. It makes sense for everyone.
Exactly, from cubesats to a little bigger satellites, it's very convenient to actually capture this market and to improve and augment the launch opportunities that we have with our launch vehicles.
And you're, of course, continuing to track what's going on there, right? And
we are currently the phases just before the ignition of the AVUM, the phases where we tilt the launcher in order to get the correct orientation just before ignition. And as soon as I have the information, I will let you know.
Okay, and that
ignition confirmed.
Ignition's confirmed. Okay, so now we have the AVUM, and that's all going well now.
It looks like it's going well, so it's a very key step right now, because this is really the AVUM that is going to do the rest of the missions and to do the last orbital maneuvers in order to, like I said, separate the satellites one by one into very specific locations in space.
Thanks, Raphael. We'll come back to you, okay? Let me introduce now François Lombard, who's actually with Airbus Intelligence. You're the one with the commercial responsibility of dealing with all these with the satellites' information and data and getting the customers to be able to use it. Welcome.
That's right.
Your thoughts so far?
Well, good morning to all. My thought, I feel relieved, happy, and fully excited about the next steps. I understand it all goes right, and I'm looking forward to the following steps of this event.
Because this has been a work in progress. It's been about 5 years or so.
Yeah, it's a long journey actually. It took about 5 years to actually get there to the first satellites. Just to mention as well, almost 1,000 people, men and women, working on this. In the Airbus team. So a big journey, and I'd like to thank them because it's really their success that we see today. And it's only the start of the journey because we'll have the second satellite, which is planned for July next launch, and we will have 2 other satellites which will be launched in the course of 2022. So big journey in front of us, and then 10 to 12 years of hard work with our customers using the imagery of these satellites.
As I said at the beginning, as we went on into this live coverage, this is a huge technological advance, a generational hop. Explain that, because I think you can really focus in on some amazing things now.
Well, typically here, these satellites and the next 3 Pléiades Neo, they will provide 30 centimeter native resolution. So it's a very, very high accuracy of the imagery, and that's the best you can get on the commercial market. There are only 2 companies in the world that can provide you that. And we have put further other innovations on top of that. You will have laser terminals on these satellites, so you can communicate directly with lasers. You will have a lot of agility and a huge capacity. So in the years to come, you will see a lot of this data actually going into many, many applications, and we'll speak about this.
And we also have to point out that this is Neo 3, but in fact there's 4 altogether going up.
Yes, exactly. And it's part of a much bigger constellation, so part of a much bigger story. But altogether, it makes a lot of sense for our customers, for our partners, and indeed, it's a technological leap because they need this 30 centimeter resolution, and they will get a lot.
Let's now look at this video explaining just what the Neo is. Go ahead.
CG 今どうなってんだろうね。こんばんさん、キスプレスちゃん来てくれてありがとう。こんりやひろちゃん来てくれてありがとう。もう打ち上がったんだけどさ、なんかすごかったよ。今日グダグダでごめんね。とりあえずもうコネクタが外れてなければ大丈夫でしょう。いろんな衛星打ち上がってますけど、大体地球観測衛星じゃないですか。今日も打ち上がるのは地球観測衛星ですってなんか毎回言ってる気がする。そしてみんな推しポイント同じ、なんか上からよく見える。いっぱい打ち上がったら多分世界変わるだろうね。PV 作りたいな。ポリアデスネオ。こんな感じの衛星が今乗ってます。これ4
at
つ
the
の衛
beginning,
星
I said
が
this was a generational leap because you can do 30 centimeters, zooms in. One key issue could be urban planning. As cities become megapolises and more of us move into towns and cities and become more dense,
今回はその
this kind of
1期目なの
technology
か
and
な。
what NEO can offer will be essential.
That's right, Chris. There are many applications. Urban mapping is one of the key ones because of the density of cities, which is growing because of pollutions, because of many areas. Here you see one image actually, which is at 50 centimeter resolution, so previous generation. But you see a city with a lot of density, lot of complexity, water, buildings, and many things. On the next page, you will see afterwards that we can play actually with artificial intelligence to get more data out of these images. This is what you see here.
Okay, first of all, explain what are the different color codes. Obviously, you can tell a river.
So, yeah, the river is in blue, obviously. In pink, you will see the buildings, so people living there. You will see in green the areas with vegetations, trees, and so on, and the roads and many, many other things. What's important is that this type of map is very, very precise. So you can use it for many things which are important missions. If you have waters going up, a flood, for instance, you can really see and calculate what will be the impact on the buildings. If you want to change a bit the environmental impact on the city, you can work very precisely on your vegetation map and get also some monitoring out of that. Finally, maybe worth to mention, you can look at the economic activity. Here it's one map, but actually the satellites are coming and coming and coming, and they give you very precise information. You can look at objects, cars, people, and you can actually derive information from that.
Question though, this is 30 centimeter. What is it until now?
Well, until now, Airbus was providing 50 centimeter and above, which was providing already a lot of information and very, very strong position on the market. But clearly, the market is expecting more. They're expecting also more capacity, more agility, more information. And that's the sweet spot, which is currently 30 centimeters on the commercial market.
Can I stop you for a second, Damien?
Just hot news, we have the confirmation of the cutoff of the first AVUM according to the timing and trajectory is completely nominal.
Okay, so in human talk, what does that mean?
It means that we have completed the first part of the AVUM job and we are where we want to be at the time where we want to be. So everything is nominal.
So your client here must be happy.
Close to Christmas.
Well, that's good news. We'll wait for more from you coming up.
For sure.
So let's take this a bit further now. It's not just, I mentioned the AI, but you'll talk to me about that in a second. But pollution on maritime issues also could be extremely relevant with this new.
Indeed, maritime surveillance, maritime security, maritime pollution are topics which are more and more important. In the maritime domain, you have one additional difficulty, which is that you are looking at very, very broad areas. That's where, again, you need a lot of capacity, several satellites. But sometimes you are also looking at very precise things, looking for a ship which you have lost. Here on this image, which you see here, you have actually a tanker here. This tanker was hijacked. And nobody could find them. The only way to find them was to use our satellites. So this is a kind of mission that you can complete, which has very, very strong security impact.
This was a hijacked ship, a real case scenario.
Yes.
Okay, well, you've got to tell us, did they find the bad guys?
They found the bad guys, and thanks to our satellites.
Go into the pollution area as well. I'm interested in that, how that can help.
Well, the pollution is also indeed an interesting case because on Pléiades Neo we have decided also to get some spectral bands that give us more information around the water, and especially we can go a few meters below the water in terms of visibility. And that gives us information like looking at plastics, for instance, looking at specific pollutions which is not exactly at the surface. So we'll get a lot of these new informations, and I think it will help a lot on the market.
And who would ask for that kind of information? Would that be governments, NGOs? Would that be private enterprise?
Honestly, it's all, more and more. It started obviously a lot with governments, NGOs and so on, but more and more also the commercial market, the private markets are looking at these kind of things from different perspectives, economical perspectives, responsibility, so it's moving a lot.
So, you know how they talk about how those massive islands of pollution or litter, debris in the water, kind of going with the currents, so you could track that?
We could track that. I hope we can track that. That's the idea. And actually to get some more and more information and to help to solve at least partially the issue. Here you can see also on the map another aspect which I think is interesting. Is here we have used artificial intelligence to actually track and look for ships. On the previous image you had plenty of ships. So obviously if you are doing that as a human, it takes you time and sometimes you miss the ships. Here, with the artificial intelligence, you get it automatically, very performing, but only if you have good images. And that's why it's very important to have good satellites with very accurate images. Here, you even see through the clouds. That's where the machine, together with the good imagery, is doing some miracles.
So you can penetrate cloud cover?
Almost. They are using some space between the clouds, but somehow it gives information we didn't get before.
That's extraordinary that you can use AI with satellite imagery to do so many things now. This is a real advance, right?
Yes, and that's really a kind of virtuous circle the more AI, the more data we can use. And the more data, the more satellites, the more capacity we have, the more missions we can
キュリオシテ
fulfill.
ィカメラいっぱいつけてるけど
Francois, this is all very, very interesting. You'll be with us again very shortly, but I'm now going to pass it on to your colleague now, who's going to be joining us. So thanks for that. That's all very enlightening to hear that, okay? And we're having good news now, of course,
あん
from
まり知らな
Damien.
かった
So
カメラ
now,
とかは詳しくないかも
so Damien, do you have something else?
Yeah, just to tell you that we have lost completely nominally the telemetry link, which is completely foreseen. So now we will wait for the next acquisition of the telemetry at the end of the first ballistic phase, and I will come back to you just when the telemetry will come back as well.
Okay, come back with some great news,
Thank you.
okay?
Bye.
All right, thank you. So now, I would like to introduce Philippe Farm, who's head of Earth observation at Airbus. Hello, Philippe. I guess you've heard some of the good news that things are going well.
Hi, Chris. Yes, very good news indeed. Very relieved.
Explain to me, from a simple person like me, why do you call it a Neo?
We call it Neo because this is the real latest technology for satellite imagery, the latest generation of satellite performance and capacities. Latest generation, so this is why we call it Neo.
Where was the satellite made? I think you're going to tell me a lot of it was in Europe and a huge amount in France.
Yes, indeed. I mean, both platform and instruments were designed, developed, manufactured and tested in Toulouse. We are embarking mainly European technologies and equipment that we collected all over Europe and also in France. So it's a French plus European satellite indeed.
Describe to me, as we've been talking, it's the generational leap. We've gone from 50 centimeters down to 30. But there's more to this than that, isn't it? The way we make satellites is quicker, cheaper, lighter. There's so much, right?
Exactly. This satellite has been is the result of 5 intense years of hard work, millions of labor hours to come up with a very compact, very agile design. This is embarking really the latest technologies in terms of detection chain, silicon carbide material, very capable end-to-end processing chain, a very, let's say, capable satellite indeed.
I think in a few seconds we're actually going to be able to see another animated reality of the satellite. And before it comes up, another key thing is this satellite can last longer, right?
Yes, currently the lifetime of our satellites is 10 plus years. It used to be 7, 5 or 3 years, 20 years ago. We've made a lot of progress. We are now quicker in building, cheaper in cost, very efficient in launch.
I think we can see it right here.
Very big difference.
How about that? So talk us through what we're seeing here.
Yes, here you see a 3D animation of our satellite design. You see how compact it is. What is the very small satellite size? You see how the accommodation of all instrument, platform equipment, solar arrays has been optimized to really fit in a very small volume to enable an optimum launch compatibility and to be able to use a lot of launch capacity.
How much smaller in size would it have been, say, to the previous generation one?
I think we saved a ratio of 2 to 3 times thanks to miniaturization, thanks to compactness, thanks to very bold and innovative design to really maximize and optimize the size of the spacecraft and accommodating the maximum of equipment in a minimum volume, minimum size.
That's pretty impressive.
Yes, very nice design, very innovative, capable of impressive performances, 30 centimeter native resolution, a lot of collection of capacity in square kilometers, etc.
And 5 years to build this?
5 years to build this, from kickoff to launch.
And what would have been the previous generation time lap?
Usually, with the design, the manufacturing, and then the launch, it used to be 7 plus years, even with lower capacities, lower performances. Now we have industrial processes, far more, I would say, and quicker methodologies from design to manufacturing and test, which allowed us to have far more performances in less cost and quicker time to delivery.
So it makes you wonder, we'll talk about the future in a bit, but what could you achieve in 10 or 15 years from now? It'd be extraordinary.
Well, you know, we are working on constellations, on building more and more satellites in terms of numbers, in terms of time to delivery, in terms of launching several satellites at once. So we will continue to improve, being smaller, being quicker, and being less costly to launch and operate.
Okay, now the chicken and egg thing for both of you. What comes first? You design a new satellite and think, will the customers come, or do the customers say, I want something new?
For me, it's all about the customer, honestly, and this Pléiades Neo journey was about answering a customer request, a customer need. So we took all the efforts, all the knowledge we have from the last 25 years on this market and put it into these satellites. It's all about delivering to the customers.
So let me get this right. The customer calls you and says, I want something newer, bigger, better, and then you call up Philippe and say, get it done.
Well, in fact, we work very tightly together from the understanding of the marketplace and the customer expectations to translate that into design features, capabilities, to both deliver very high resolution imagery, capacity of collection, very quick tasking capabilities and downloading of imagery, together with the ground capacities to process the imagery, to enable digital services deliveries to our customers. So it's an end-to-end chain of capacities and performances to satisfy our customers with respect to their latest expectations, the needs for application, and also to satisfy the global marketplace.
Without giving away any business-sensitive information, what kind of, I guess customers are already anxiously waiting for this to go up and use it. So what kind of things have they said they'd like to use it for without giving anything too sensitive?
The typical customers, we have governmental customers for sure, but actually what was amazing in the journey of the last years is that it's more on the commercial market that we got the highest, I would say, appetite, especially to invest upfront. So we have already customers before the launch, so we have people who really believed into the quality, into the performance of what we deliver before seeing the images. And that's great. That's a great comfort. And now we will work on the next phase of customers, governmental, commercial, non-governmental. It's really plenty, thousands of different customers who are interested.
If I'm a new customer who I'm liking what you're telling me, so I want to get some photos from you. I've never reached out to Airbus. Is there a number I call? How do I get in touch with you and say I want some photos?
It's a good question. There are different ways, and it's constantly evolving. Actually, one of the easiest ways is to go through our web interface, a digital platform, as we call it now, which is called One Atlas. This is a very easy web connection where you have access actually to our full library of data, not only from the last days and months, but from years. On top of that, you can use and benefit from the performance on the clouds. You have seen the artificial intelligence effect I showed you. You can do that in a few minutes, actually using the computing power of the clouds. And you can, of course, task satellites with this type of web interface, which is very modern.
And just very quick wrap, data protection is incredibly important as well.
It is very important. It is very important, and especially for some of our governmental customers. So it has been always at the core of our work and of our systems. And you were asking me on the way to get access to the data. Actually, some customers need also a direct access. This is why we have teams all around the world who are also able to interface with the customers directly and take care of their special needs.
Thank you very much, François. You'll come back in a bit. I'm now going to bring Raphael in because we have another important segment here. You'll be back in a second. Thank you very much. So, you know perfectly well that we interact with you through social media a lot. We love it. Keep on sending in your questions and queries because we want to answer them. And this is a whole new sequence as part of this live streaming tonight of the VEGA launch, the first of 2021, I should remind you. And you sent in a bunch of questions, and Philippe and my other guru here are here to answer them. So we want to talk to you about some of these questions. And here's the first one. A little homework. Someone who likes to play golf. What force is required to place a golf ball on orbit?
Well, this is an excellent question that still requires some simplifications. So let's consider a golf ball that is placed on the equator. So it already benefits from the rotational speed of the Earth. So the whole point in putting the ball into orbit is to give it a speed of at least 8 kilometers per second. If that speed is lower than this limit, then the ball will fall back on Earth because the force applied to the ball is weaker than the gravity force of the Earth. If the speed is higher than 11 kilometers per second, then the ball will escape the gravity of the Earth and it will continue its way into space. Also, we have to note that the force that needs to be applied to orbit the ball is also dependent on how fast you want to get there. If, for example, you want to put the ball into orbit in 10 minutes, then the force you will apply is rather weak. It will be at the order of magnitude of less than 1 Newton. If you want to get there in 10 seconds, then you will need to apply a much stronger force that would be more than 30 newtons. And this is, again, very simplified way to see the problem because, of course, we don't take into account the friction of the air, which is very dependent on the specific shape of the launch vehicle and also dependent on the trajectory that you will choose in order to put your object into orbit.
Okay, but we're not going to be playing golf anytime soon in orbit, but let's go to the next question, and this is for you, Philippe. Are there any situations where a satellite could catch fire in space?
Well, you know, there's no atmosphere up there, so we don't have fire per se. We may have some other failures like electrical shutdown, short circuits, propulsion issues and failures. So this is the kind of failures we face in orbit on satellites. And then you have to resolve that remotely to solve the issue and to get back on track.
Regarding launch vehicle, what we do is that we passivate the upper stage. It just means that we drop the residual propellant in order to prevent from an explosion due to a sudden heat from the sun. This is very key in order not to generate debris that would be caused by the explosion. This is required by the French space law, which is one of the most virtuous legislation framework in the space sector.
Fantastic. Now let's go to a third question here. We're getting a lot of questions, but you know, we talked about this earlier, Philippe, the mega constellations. There's so many satellites going out, the cubesats, there's tiny ones going up there. And so we're getting a lot of questions about increasing risks. Could there be collisions? And also we had one real big fan of space who sent in a question as well. And we hope we can see it here in a second about what are the risks of a collision between, say, a launcher and a satellite. Hopefully we can see that now. Well, there we are.
Hi, Aria and Airbus. As it's getting quite busy up there in low Earth orbit with satellites.
Okay.
How is it worked out from the launch time the satellite deployment that they are safe from collision by other satellites?
Well,
We are all focused on the success of the mission. We are here in the Jupiter cell control with all our partners from Avio, from ESA, from CNES. And we are just now before the big event.
This, of course, marks Vega's return to flight. Tell me how that's going.
So we are going to
velocity booster of the VEGA launch vehicle. The second and third stages that we call Zephyro 23 and Zephyro 9 will continue.
北向きにこう打ち上げをして、さすがに南には大陸があるからさすがにしないよね。で、アメリカは南に飛ばす。そう、ここのやつは多分こっちかこっちに打ち上げて、ここだとこっちには打ち上げると下があるから、こっち。ちょっと今何が起こっていますか？今ベガの打ち上げを見ようとしてたとこ終わったらもう終わって調整に行こうとしてますけど、調整もう打ち上げたりとかしてないよね。まだだよね 起動解説動画欲しい。起動解説動画書きたい。多分リアよりももっとコメント欄の皆様の方がすごい分かってらっしゃると思うので、なのでもし何かあったらこうやってアドバイスくれて、今のままで本当にありがたいんです。アドバイスくれてありがとう。もしなんか変なこと言ったら教えてください。じゃあ行きますよ。北から北向きに打ち上げをして、さっきの P1 段目固体ロケットを打ち上げて1分ちょいで分離して、2段目 Z23、 これ Z23 って書いてますけど、本当の名前がなんだっけ、1段目と2段目と3段目ゼフィーロかな、ゼフィーロちゃんの23は23トン入ってるっていうことって教えてもらいました。さっき23トン固体が入ってる、固体火薬が入ってるって感じかな。でシュッ
The fairing separation will be triggered during the flight of the Zephyr9, the third stage booster.
2段目とか分離して3段目がついて、3段目も分離する前にフェアリングがついて分離して、
of the Zephyr9 flight
解説が早いんだよこれ。
will trigger the
一
separation
瞬
of the
しか出ないじ
stage.
ゃん。で3段目が分離していなくなって、で3段目もいなくなった後なんですけど、これが上段エンジンですね。
Which will occur in direct visibility of Bermuda. We have then
上
the
段エ
first
ンジンが8分後に燃え始めるということらしいです。でも燃えて
ignition of
ぐ
the
るぐるぐる
avum,
ぐる飛んでる感
which
じ。
is the upper
飛
stage
ぶ方向が
reignitable
ほら
engine.
東向きとかじゃな
The
くて、こう
cutoff
極
of
軌
the
道ってい
stage
うんですけ
8
ど、
minutes
こう
after
い
the
う地球
ignitions
の
will
北
occur in
極
visibility
の
of
極
Saint
側を
Hubert.
通る、そういう縦向
And
きの軌
after
道
this cutoff, we start a
今回は
phase
取っていま
that
す。
we call the long ballistic phase, which allow us to reach the visibility from a new Norcia in Australia,
こ
where
の軌
we
道に
will
乗った
trigger the
衛星
second
は地
avum
上から
boost
見ていつも同じ時
before
間帯
releasing
上
the
空を
first
通
main
過していく
passenger,
ことになるの
Pléiades
で、い
Neo
つも同
3.
じ条件で発射できる
After
んで
the
すね。
release of
発見
Pléiades
され
Neo
たのは
3,
案
we
が遅い。
prepare for the
そうかそうかそう
injection
か。
into the
縦
orbit
向きにこう
required
ぐ
by
る
the
ぐるぐる
auxiliary
ぐるする
passengers
から、
with
太
two
陽の
boosts,
光と
the
太陽
third
の
and the
光の
fourth
面
avum
と
boost, which will occur in visibility of
衛
Galileo,
星が
and we
回
have
ってい
the
る面が全
sequence
く
of
同じって
separation
ことだよ
of
ね。
the 5 auxiliary passengers
そういえばいい
in
の。
visibility
太
of
陽が
Bermuda,
渡って
one
いる
after
光の
another.
面ってあるじゃん。そ
The
の
launcher
面
will
を
complete its mission with
描い
the
て飛んでるって
fifth
感じか。
avum boost in visibility of Saint Hubert
その面
in
を描い
order
て
to
飛んでいるか
trigger
ら、
the re-entry.
Very quick question before we get to the final countdown.
どの国でも
Compared
例え
to
ば
say
朝
when
10
Thomas
時
Pesquet
とか
went
だ
up
っ
to
た
do
ら
the
朝午前
ISS
10
last
時の
week,
どの
how
国の
is it
映
the
像
same
も撮れるっ
orbit
て
or
感じかな。
No, it's not the same orbit. We will
Sono
start,
prima
of course,
giorno,
below
sono
the
prima
altitude
giorno,
of the ISS. At the end of the first avum boost, we are slightly below the altitude of the ISS. During the first ballistic phase that we discussed about, the altitude increases and we go beyond the altitude of the ISS,
リオも海外
and we
ネキなんで、
separate all our
フラン
customers
スからした
far
ら、
beyond the
フランス
altitude
から
of
し
the
たら
ISS.
海外ネキかもし
we
れ
can
ないんで。
see
もっ
right now
と
behind
大
us
物
here
カメラ
on
載
the
せろよ、オラって
space
言っと
wall
ください。もっ
the
と
teams
大
getting
物カ
ready
メラ
for
載
the
せてほし
final
いし、
seconds
CG
before
でもいい
liftoff.
から
Yeah,
ずっと出
this
して
is
てほ
the
しい
mission
です。
manager who will announce us
おじち
1
ゃんの
minute
解説
before
は
liftoff.
必要です。でも CG も出してほしいです。
The role
でも CG は素晴らしい
the
で
DDOs,
す。
they
と
call
て
in
も
French
素
the
敵な
range
CG で
manager.
す。
The range manager is the guy who is in charge of monitoring the status
文
of
句
the
できな
different
かった。文句
preparations
言えなかった。最終的にやっ
for
ぱあり
the
がとうって言
operation
った。
coming
あ
from
り
the
がとう。
ground and also acquiring the
いつも
status
軽い
from
と
the
ころ止め
launcher.
られるんだ。そうなるっ
And
てことだ
we're
よ
going
ね。
to be
ありが
going
とう
to
ご
the.
ざいま
How
す。
long do you think we've got until the countdown?
センター
We are
スペシャ
around
ル
40 seconds
ギア
until the
の
liftoff.
CSC
So
スパ
we're
チ
almost
ャ
there.
ル
And
スペシャ
just
ル
also the ground
Gianna
stations. Very
Space
quickly, in
Center,
10 seconds,
CSG.
their role.
Yes, we have several ground stations
おはようございます
around the
ゆうちゃん
Earth in order to
うっすい
allow us
です
to get
ロ
direct
スちゃん
data
こん
coming
にち
from the
は
launcher
次はロン
and
グマッチ
provide
見
you
る
with
から
the
ね
actual
待ってて
status.
ね
So we're there now. So now let's listen in and watch.
À tous
さあ
les
打ち上げ
DDO,
を見て終わりにしましょう。
attention
そ
pour
し
les
てロングマッチを見に
décomptes
行きましょう。The a lot of launches going on. Ariane and Long March and Falcon 9 are within a few hours. ね、今日は本当に
6,
This is the first launch.
4, 3, 2, unité.
アンデュトロワトロワアンデュトロワ
Allumage P80 et décollage VEGA.
こんにちは、バラネットちゃん。これリプレイです。リプレイです。リプレイです。
La propulsion est nominale.
アンデュトロワだとカウントアップしちゃう。あー trois, two, and
Tired of seeing this.
go.
No, it's always something very beautiful to look at.
So we're into it now. What happens? We track it now. Tell me what happens now.
Yeah, now we are in the phase that we call the P80 phase. It's the name of the first stage boosters, which allows us to get far from the launch pad. During this phase, we burn solid propellant, so the name of P80 comes from the amount of propellant that we have on board, so it's roughly 80 tons of propellant, slightly more. And during these phases, the launcher provides thrust and acceleration, and the separation of the stage will be triggered when the acceleration will get below a predefined threshold in order to get use of this mass, which is useless once you have used almost all the propellant inside.
When will the first separation take place?
The first separation will take place around 2 minutes after liftoff, so we should see it in a few seconds.
And you're monitoring, you're directly in contact with Kuri.
Yeah, I have a direct contact with the people who are getting the real-time telemetry data and who are monitoring the current status of the launcher. As soon as I will get the confirmation, I will let you know along all the mission.
And this is the next really important stage.
Yes, and the separation of the P80 has just been confirmed, and we have the ignition of the second stage, which we call the Zephyro 23.
So confirmation, the first separation has gone ahead as planned, which is what we were looking for. What happens next?
Now it's the job of the second stage, which will increase still the launcher velocity and the altitude in order to provide additional energy to the launcher. And then when it will complete its job, it is exactly the same principle as for the P80. It means once we have used almost all the propellant that is inside the stage, we will trigger the separation, once again based on the detection of the acceleration.
Okay, and in any moment now, we're going to hopefully go back to Kuri through the space wall and see the team monitoring all the progress. I guess the ground stations giving all the information as well as we need. Great. This whole operation was supposed to take an hour and 40 between launch and dropping off all the different satellites.
Between the liftoff and the